Hello everyone, Mark here, Mark's Max Muscle, and today we are going to discuss a very interesting topic. We are going to look throughout the history of bodybuilding and discover some athletes, some bodybuilders that I believe competed in the wrong era, in the wrong decade. And I am sure some of you guys are thinking, Sergio Oliva, if he had competed now, he would be so good. Fact is, guys, he was a Mr. Olympia champion 3 times. So to say he competed in the wrong era would be kind of foolish, if you think about it. But yes, he would absolutely have been incredible if he competed now. Yeah, actually, he would have been good if he competed any time, and I think him competing in the late 60s, that's when he was champion, was just fine and suited his physique perfectly. And in terms of Arnold Schwarzenegger, a guy like Serge Nubret, and Lou Ferrigno, these guys and their physiques were absolutely suited for their time. Lou Ferrigno, he quit in his early 20s. Had he continued, he would have been an Olympia champion. And Serge Nubret also, if he had not went to NABA, I think he would have became Mr. Olympia champion as well. And a guy like Mike Menzer, also have to get this out of the way because I could just foresee you guys. What about Mike Menzer, Mark's Max Muscle? He competed in the wrong time. On the contrary, I think Mike Menzer competed at the exact right time. He quit after the 1980 Olympia debacle, things of that nature. Had he not quit, I think he could have saw 1, 2, 3 Olympia titles. I think it was the perfect time for Mike Menzer. Now, when you get to a guy like Danny Padilla, I think Danny Padilla suits this video for sure. I think this is the type of bodybuilder that I am looking for, because as good as Danny Padilla was, and trust me, this guy was mint. And I only haul out that word every once in a while. But trust me, Danny Padilla was mint. As good as he was, he only ever placed 5th at an Olympia level because he was only just over 5 feet tall. I'm sure we'll have some height experts that will let us know exactly how tall he was, but he was probably around 5 feet 2 inches. So yeah, his competition, I mean, he was in the open class. So I believe he should have competed nowadays, or at least after 2008, where they had the 212 division, or even with his lines, he could have competed in the men's classic physique division. But considering that he did compete a little bit in the, the mass monster era where they had a little bit extra juice, things of that nature, wink, wink, he did adapt perfectly to all that stuff, and he did show a lot of size. But it was a little bit too late for him. But that just showed me that, yes, if he had competed nowadays, he would be a shoo-in for a 212 division champion, so his parents would have been well advised to wait. Of course, they'd be too old by then. It's just a little bit of a joke, guys. Danny Padilla absolutely would have been better off competing now than back in the early 80s. And since we talk about Danny Padilla, you cannot ignore Tom Platz. Tom Platz, he should be the poster boy for this video. Well, thumbnail anyway. I don't think the bodybuilding world, let alone the judges, were ready to place these wheels. I mean, these legs, they so far super exceeded or superseded anybody else's. I gotta learn proper English. But anyway, you guys know what I'm saying. His legs were a lot better than everybody else's. And considering he had revolutionary condition, back development, thick muscle everywhere, I mean, yes, Tom Platz would have been so much better off competing in, say, the early 2000s or even the 90s, when they appreciated that type of level of conditioning. They were more into the aesthetics, Frank Zane's, things of that nature. So a Tom Platz, no, definitely was not competing in the right era. Now, had he been competing in the right time, he would have been multiple-time Mr. Olympia champion with that level of condition and muscle. Next gentleman, now he's in pretty much the same boat as Platz. Competed in the early 80s, late 70s, around that time. And this guy was huge. Now think, a guy like Frank Zane was the Mr. Olympia champion. Looks like a scrap of a man compared to this great big stud hitting the scene. Brutal, Bertil Fox. I mean, this guy was incredible. His first Olympia, 1982. What did he get? 8th place, I believe. And there was Chris Dickerson. He was the winner. And I have to tell you, definitely with the physique that Bertil Fox had, he should have got a higher place than that. And then came 1983. I mean, this guy was shredded. Brutal Bertil Fox had the best body out there, in my opinion. I mean, he was out muscling the likes of Lee Haney, and he got 5th. They were still kind of favoring those Frank Zane type physiques, I guess. But anyway, he slipped in placings more and more each passing year. So brutal Bertil Fox, he definitely, by competing in the 1980s, early 80s at that, I definitely would wager to say that he competed in the wrong era. He should have competed, anytime. The 90s, 2000s, even today, a mass monster like this would have great success on the bodybuilding stage. Now, the next gentleman could be of some debate whether he deserves to be on this list or not. I figured I would toss him in. This is Lee Labrada, and he was quite a success on the bodybuilding stage, placing 2nd at the Olympia a couple of times to Lee Haney, of course. He was competing at the tail end of Lee Haney's career, and then switched to Dorian Yates as obviously the torchbearer of the Olympia crown. And Lee Labrada, I mean, he was aesthetically pleasing. Had he competed earlier in the 80s, maybe he would have had a chance, but even that would be a stretch. And obviously he had no chance of ever defeating Dorian Yates. But the guy was so aesthetically pleasing, and he had a revolutionary level of condition for his time. So I believe that Lee Labrada would have been the best today when they after they created the men's classic physique division. I believe that, yes, Lee Labrada, he would have been a multiple time classic physique division champion. Of course, Chris Bumstead might have something to say about that. But Lee Labrada being a success on the bodybuilding stage could be a debate, as well as Rich Gaspari. I mean, the guy's condition, if he was competing after the 80s, he probably would have placed higher. Of course, he wasn't that massive, so I don't know. He was a success either way, so I guess Rich Gaspari did somewhat compete at the right time. Now, Phil Hill, I believe, just missed the boat. He competed in the late 80s. I mean, if he competed in the mid-90s, this guy would have been a threat to the Olympia title with those wheels and the back on the guy. I mean, so overlooked. Not only overlooked, but very underrated. And put it all together, and he deserves to be on this video because absolutely Phil Hill competed at the wrong time. He placed like 12th, I think, at the Olympia. I think he placed just ahead of Sean Ray at the 1988 Mr. Olympia. It was the only time he ever competed. So, much like everybody else on this list, this guy should have competed years after he did. But not everybody's like that. Look at Bob Paris, if you will. I'm sure some people will say, well, he should compete in the men's classic physique division, right? On the contrary, I think Bob Paris should hop into one of those DeLoreans and go back to the 1950s, just like in that movie, Back to the Future, which I do recommend, by the way. Part 1's the best. 2 and 3, I like part 1. But either which way, guys, Bob Paris against Steve Reeves. Take a look, guys. I think, he would have been good in the classic physique division, but I think Bob Paris would have been ideal for the back in the 1950s. I think good old Steve Reeves probably would have stayed in bodybuilding to, trade back and forth titles. The would have been the universe title back then. So yeah, you can go one way with it. I think Bob Paris goes the other way. I think he goes back in time, not what you guys were thinking. Well, actually. Now this next gentleman, I think we can put in the same boat as our friend Bob Paris. This is Charles Clairmonte. He competed mainly in the late 80s, early 90s. Take a look at his physique. I don't think that he should have competed in the 50s like Bob Paris. I think Charles Clairmonte would have been main competition for Arnold Schwarzenegger. Could you imagine? Charles Clairmonte, this here physique versus Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was tall as well. He was probably close to being the same height as Schwarzenegger. So I think Charles Clairmonte, who competed, like I said, in the 90s, would have been ideal for the 1970s, even the late 60s, early 70s. Like I said, when Arnold competed. And the guy competed in a time where he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. They were still rewarding guys like Labrada pretty decent placings because they weren't full blown into that mass monster era yet, but then they had Paul Dillette standing there. So what was a guy like Charles Clairmonte to do? Get in that DeLorean, man. Go back to 1971 and win that Olympia title. So yes. Charles Clairmonte competed in the wrong time. And so did this dude here. A lot of you guys may be unfamiliar with this guy. This is Hamdullah Aykutlu. I believe that is how you pronounce his name. And I'm sure many of you guys are thinking, well, he competed in the mass monster era. Obviously, this is 93 Olympia. He placed dead last. So you guys are probably thinking, well, he should have competed way back when. On the contrary, turn him around and it is plain to see why this guy competed in the wrong era. He was the most shredded, hands down the most shredded guy there. He was more conditioned than Dorian Yates himself, and if you're a Dorianite, take a look at the glutes. I mean, my soul. You can't argue with that. This level of condition received a dead last placing. Is that how they rewarded that type of condition? If he had competed now, I mean, take a look, guys. Against Chris Bumstead, the men's classic physique division champion. Who do you think is in better condition? I'll take the question away from you. I'll tell you right now, Hamdullah Aykutlu. He is more conditioned than Chris Bumstead, so definitely was overlooked and was not appreciated, that level of condition. If this guy had competed now, he would have been a shoo-in for a number one contender anyway. I guess he would have to deal with Lee Labrada. He was competing in the classic physique as well. But yes, with the level of condition like that, so revolutionary. To place dead last, it's obvious he was competing in the wrong time. But then again, who cares about strided glutes? Look at them arms. The girls don't care about no strided glutes. They want to see these big biceps. This is Lee Priest. And if you hadn't guessed, yes, I believe that Lee Priest competed in the wrong time, the wrong era. He was so full of muscle. He was as big as a house, conditioned, and it was when they rewarded all that stuff. So why did he compete in the wrong era? It's 'cause I look to the left of me, look to the right of me. I was surrounded by giants. Nassau, somebody. Ronnie King Coleman. Yeah, buddy, I ain't gonna lose to him anymore. But yes, with the condition, the flow, I mean the muscle that this guy had, if he competed now, he would be in fact competing in the 212 division. Actually, I think that he should have competed when they first started the 212 division. We wouldn't be talking about Flex James Lewis. We'd be talking about Lee Priest, multiple-time 212 division champion. So yes, Lee Priest just missed the boat. Competed, like I said, he competed as far back as the 90s. But he was more prominent in the early 2000s. should have been around in the late 2000s. Lee would have been 212 division champion, I think, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Let's finish this one off with Cedric McMillan. I believe that Cedric McMillan, much like everybody else on this video, competed at the wrong time. Now, that doesn't mean that they didn't all garner some success. It just means that he would have been much more successful had he competed at a different time. The fact that he was losing against a guy like Kai Green definitely lends some credibility to that. I mean, this guy looked so much better than Kai. It was a conditioning thing, a back development deal, I guess. And I'm sure most of you guys are thinking, Marks Max Muscle, tell us when you think Cedric should have competed. And I'm sure most of you guys are thinking Arnold's day, because him and Arnold got along so well. Actually, I think Cedric McMillan would have been the only person ever to be able to defeat the great Lee Haney. I think that he was just a little bit bigger, just a little bit better. I think he would have been a little bit better than Lee Haney. The condition was similar with these guys. The muscle, the structure, everything. So Cedric McMillan, if he had competed in the mid to late 80s, I think he would have been one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time. But yes, of course, Cedric would have been suited to the 1970s, competing against Arnold Schwarzenegger as well. Now, to say any bodybuilder nowadays is not suited to his era or not suited to the decade which he competes, I mean, it's kind of foolish. You got guys like Andrew Jack, you got guys like Nick Walker, total opposites, and both of these guys could win the Mr. Olympia championship. I mean, it is that flexible as far as the look that the judges are looking for right now. And you got other divisions. You got classic physique. You got 212. You got a dozen or two women's divisions. So I guess no matter what your physique, there is a division for you. And like I said, I believe the judges are more flexible on what they are looking for nowadays. Like I said, Andrew Jack, Nick Walker, you got Samson Dauda, whole bunch of different types of physiques. So yes, this is a bit of a fun one. Let me know in the comment section below if you guys know some bodybuilders from the 80s that should have competed now or would have been more suited to compete now. Obviously, these guys are the ages that they are, and there's nothing you can do about that, but just a fun one. Just some entertainment for you bodybuilding fans. Hit thumbs up on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel. Have a nice one.